This is 7 minutes past 21 hours GMT in London on Saturday, the 1st of August 2020. This is continuing the contextual commentary on the observance of the Eid al-Adha. And the news items include the Brexiteering loons Aaron Banks and Richard Wigmore are exposed as having been involved in destabilizing, undermining Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. Now, Ardern made herself an enemy to all the racists and anti-Muslims by standing in solidarity with the Muslim community after the two massacres in the mosques in New Zealand. And that was lauded by Muslim countries and Muslim communities across the world. But it was also the reason why arch anti-Muslims and racists decided to focus on her, and as the election is set to be held in September in New Zealand, some of the world's notorious racists have gathered in New Zealand trying to encourage and give support to her political rivals and racist enemies. So that is Wigmore and Aaron Banks in New Zealand. And in Britain, apart from the fact that Charlie Elphicke, the sexist MP and a friend of Boris Johnson's, has been found guilty on Thursday of sexually assaulting two women and more. There is another Tory who has been making the news as the next candidate to be approved as Boris Johnson's propagandist against the Muslims in West Yorkshire. Craig Whitaker, the West Yorkshire MP, has singled out Muslim communities for allegation that they are responsible for spreading the coronavirus by meeting too often and too many times and too closely, which is continuing the anti-Muslim line paraded by Andy Barnum, the Greater Manchester mayor. So it doesn't actually show that the Labour Party, whose slogan was, according to Jeremy Corbyn, for the many, not the few. Now it seems that the Labour Party leadership and the Labour Party as a whole, in terms of formal organization, is not for the Muslims at all, even when the Tories are spewing out anti-Muslim hatred. Now, this is the kind of representative popular newspaper headlines about Charlie Elphicke. And when Elphicke was being found guilty of sexually assaulting women, Nigel Farage, his fellow anti-Muslim, anti-migrant propagandist and inciter of hatred, was touring a part of the Midlands where the most vulnerable, some of the most vulnerable and scared migrants were being given housing during the coronavirus emergency, the coronavirus pandemic emergency, as part of the steps announced by Robert Jenrick in March and being continued, despite the fact that Jenrick doesn't really want to continue the moratorium or the ban on evictions, because Jenrick belongs with the big business, degenerators and the violators of the rights. But because of his political opportunism and his career, he has been forced into a corner and has been forced to extend the moratorium by a few more weeks. But this is the month of August when the moratorium is going to end in less than 3 weeks' time now from today's date. And when that happens, hundreds of thousands of people will be made homeless or be subject to Section 21 notice, which means that the courts are given a license to rubber stamp such an application, which means that Section 21 doesn't require the applicant, the landlord, so called, to show any reason or prove any fault on the part of the victim or the target of their Section 21 notice for eviction. Now, this is something that the Labour Party has been absolutely disastrously silent about. And Corbyn, whom we have originally described as the garden gnome leader, has shown on that one that he is a garden gnome, despite the fact that he has been in place for 5 years, despite all kinds of rows and dissension and treachery and demonization, whatever. Corbyn was not unseated. Corbyn was not thrown out of the post of leader of the Labour Party in the UK. And despite all these 5 years of his tenure, Corbyn failed to address the crisis and the causes of the crisis of homelessness. I made a world exclusive commentary lauding, praising Corbyn's article as was published in the Morning Star on 20th of September 2012. I was the only one, and I think I remain the only one on record to have broadcast a detailed series of comments and commentary based on Corbyn's article as published in the Communist Party Morning Star on the 20th of September 2012. That was the same date on the evening, within few hours of my broadcast, praising Corbyn. I was invited to a meeting with Lutfur Rahman in a cafe in New Road, London E1, which is in the Whitechapel area. And at that meeting, I asked Lutfur Rahman to take action, within quotes, as the executive mayor imposed, against a persistent racist liar in employment of Tower Hamlets Council who was lying and causing persistent crisis of homelessness. Lutfur Rahman praised me in indescribably positive terms. And I told him that I was not there to be praised by him, but to tell him that he was doomed to fail if he didn't take action and didn't take my advice and didn't take action against the liars and the racists and the criminals in posts in Tower Hamlets Council. Lutfur failed to take any action, and the rest, as they say, is history, because Lutfur, as the mayor, is history. Now, he should have taken action, correct action against the criminals in the council, but instead he was ousted on the 23rd of April 2015, which is 3 years after I had that conversation with him, and on the grounds that, as the election commissioner, Richard Morey put it, for illegal and corrupt practices. I had said to him that he was doomed, but he obviously did not believe anything I said, as he didn't believe the people who were challenging him before the petition, and he defied them and he showed two fingers to them. Now, Lutfur has been dressed as the Muslim mayor of Tower Hamlets by none other than Donald Trump. And Trump was informed by Farage and others in Britain that Tower Hamlets was a hotbed of radical Muslims, and that was proven by the fact that the highest political post was being held by a Muslim. Now, we shall come to that in due course later, in later editions. But today is still part of the week of Eid al-Adha in the UK and across the West. And one of the items that I want to talk about is cruelty to animals generally, and cruelty to cats in particular, that has been seen across so many Muslim countries and communities and societies and in families. But I first start by talking about the language. The language includes cats and dogs. Now, cats and dogs is not a mere reference of physical kind of entities to entities, but cats and dogs are derogatory, insulting, and violating and violent denial of the needs and welfare and the rights of the animals. So anyone who is condemned as being like behaving like cats and dogs is being condemned as being of the lowest standard and level of behavior. Now, in the run-up to the so-called mayoral election in 2010, one of the quotes that was attributed to the main contender against Luther Roman, that is Abbas Uddin Elias Halal, was that he called one of the Luther Roman supporters on the then Labour Party National Executive Committee, Christine Shawcroft, as behaving like an animal, and he says goats. One of the words he used against Christine Shawcroft was a goat, and Christine Shawcroft then issued a statement rebutting that and saying that she was very proud to be insulted by the likes of Abbas Uddin Halal, whom she relegated to a lower level than he had condemned her to. Now, the reason why Abbas Uddin Halal was unhappy with Christine Shawcroft was the same reason why Private Eye ran the story days before the election and headlined it in its Rotten Boroughs column as Halal Dead Beat, Dead Meat. Now, Halal Dead Beat was changed into Halal Dead Meat. Now, that was based on a number of allegations against Halal Uddin Abbas or Abbas Uddin Halal, and he was accused of having submitted a dossier against Luther Roman, and that was all done within the Labour Party because Luther Roman, at that stage when Abbas Uddin Halal submitted the dossier, was still a member of the Labour Party. And what I'm saying here during the week of Eid al-Adha is that despite the fact that these both were Muslims and both were adherents to the Islamic faith, they were condemning one another in no kind of language that can be acceptable in ordinary discourse. So where were the values, Islamic values, in their behavior? And there were allegations against Abbas Uddin Halal at a do held in the basement of a restaurant then owned by one of Luther Roman's promoters, Shirajul Haq. Shirajul Haq's name was originally spelled H-U-Q. Over the years, he has managed to change the spelling of his name to resemble my spelling of my last name. And also, he has managed to abbreviate his name in a way that looks like mine as on the register of the Labour Party. So there is a possible room for misunderstanding, but my name has been there long before Shirajul Haq. Shiraj changed his name many times. Now this is very important because Shiraj accused Abbas Uddin Halal as a liar openly at that gathering held in September in the basement of his restaurant, now sold to a Turkish group in the corner of Osborne Street and Whitechapel Road. Now, the reason I'm mentioning Shiraj is because he was the person that was linked in published accounts with the move to have an elected mayor. And he was accused in public of wanting to have an elected mayor because he could then, it was alleged, control the decisions of Tower Hamlets Council as those affected his, Shiraj's, continued business involvement in the Boishaki Mela. Now, Shiraj has, of course, denied, refuted all the allegations, but the line still persists. And I'm saying this today because if Shiraj is true to the words he spoke against Abbas Uddin Hilal as being a liar, then how is it that it is understood that he is now working with Abbas Uddin Hilal in relation to the same post, that is the mayor, elected mayor post in Tower Hamlets? If Shiraj disagrees with this or contradicts what I have said just now, he is most welcome to send me an email. He knows my email addresses and he knows how to get hold of me, and he can set the record straight as he can claim. But up to that time, until he does that, I'm saying that Shiraj has a lot of questions to answer about his role in relation to the foisting on Tower Hamlets of the elected mayor post. What does he think of the disgrace that the holder of that post brought to the community? Does he agree that it was okay, acceptable, or does he not agree? If he doesn't agree, then what record is there of Shiraj having protested against the disgracing of the name of the community by the incumbent at the time, Lutfur Rahman? And what evidence can Shiraj produce to the community that excuses Abbas Uddin Halal and makes him okay for Shiraj to work with in relation to the same post of mayor of Tower Hamlets? And we are saying this also to others who are aligned with Abbas Uddin Halal, who are involved as I speak in lying about the actual moves over whether to scrap the mayor post or whether to keep it, as long as Abbas Uddin Halal can squeeze himself back in as the Labour Party's nominee at the next mayor election. I'm saying this to everyone who can produce evidence if that is what I have just said is not the fact. And I shall incorporate the evidence if I am satisfied that the evidence they produce contradicting what I have said is the actual evidence, and it is incontrovertible, and it is factual, and it is true. Until they do that, the question remains, those who encouraged me and requested me to set up the online petitions for the scrapping of the mayor post in Tower Hamlets have got a moral, legal duty, and I repeat, legal duty to explain why they have not organized the support the two petitions and supporting signatures. They have broken their contract. They entered into on air, in public, and repeated in telephone communications with me afterwards. They have a duty to explain why they have not kept their word. And if they cannot be trusted to keep their word on this, what evidence or ground or foundation or substance is there that they can be trusted on anything else? Let alone that they actually mean to have the post of the mayor, elected mayor, scrapped. So there is the challenge to Abbasuddin Halal, and if he has not been involved in that surreptitious communication made by others on this matter on his behalf, then he can say that he did not have anything to do with it. If he didn't, then let's see the actual role Abbasuddin Halal is prepared to play to actually scrap the post of mayor in Tower Hamlets, the executive mayor. I was told, as I said before, on the 12th of December 2019 by one of the most involved opponents of Lutfur Rahman in the Election Commission petition that the number of signatures that were collected ran into several thousand against the mayor system. But that momentum, that speed, that movement was stopped by elements close to Abbasuddin Halal, who contrived a kind of excuse, a series of excuses, and had one of the others supposedly opposed to the mayor system, Ajmal Hussain, to suddenly discontinue his enthusiastic, previously seen enthusiasm to have the mayor system scrapped. So these are the challenges that I'm putting factually to these named persons. They have a duty to the community, the electors, to tell the truth of their positions about the mayor system. And I do not believe for a single second that anyone is going to make any difference to the status of the movement for having the mayor system scrapped by holding a meeting of 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50 or 100 people, because the number of signatures in the public that is required is in the thousands. So these people, whoever may assemble, if that is the case, will not be enough in numbers. And there is no evidence that there exist even 50 people, enthusiastic campaigners, that will make the difference. So we need bigger movement among the ordinary people based on evidence of the corruption and the disgrace that the elected mayor post brings to the community and violates everyone's rights. And by violation, we can repeat hundreds of cases of violations and lies and lying. I concentrate next on the role of the elected councillors. Elected councillors not only are in contact during the time when they seek the votes of the voters, but they remain in contact with many of the acquaintances long after the election is over and throughout the years following the election until the next election is due. I'm asking these councillors, do they deny that people tell them about the council's failures every week or in every conversation that they have with them? Do they deny it? If they deny it, let them say the name and the chapter and the verse about what particular section of the council, what particular person or personnel in the Tower Hamlets Council have been exonerated by such conversation that says that there is no problem. If there is a problem, what action have these councillors been taking against the wrongdoers in paid posts in the Tower Hamlets Council? And what actions have they taken, if any, to alert the diminutive John Biggs, the mayor, to these wrongdoings? Diminutive, I give credit to Dan Sabag, a former Lambeth Labour councillor who is now an executive editor at The Guardian, who published in April 2018 a piece about Tower Hamlets mayor election. And in that piece, he actually promoted the prospects of Rabina Khan. And in that atmosphere, Dan Sabag described John Biggs as the diminutive John Biggs. And I have repeated that description at least 100 times, if not on more occasion in the last 2 years plus, because it is absolutely apt. Diminution of duty is the main wrong that John Biggs embodies. He embodies a diminutive figure physically, but he embodies a bigger diminution of duty. And his crass and his relevant behavior has been pro-racist and racist. And I refer to his statement in September 2013, which he gave to the BBC television in London. And he alleged that the people in the Bow area, E3 area, or the area where there were numerically less Bangladeshis than the areas where more Bangladeshis lived, he made a statement about that. And he asserted that the priorities of Lutfur Rahman's administration were based on the benefit, the needs of the Bangladeshi community. The evidence is that while he was making that statement, I was fighting against the same administration lying against me. I'm a Bangladeshi. So unless of course Biggs excludes some Bangladeshis or most Bangladeshis from his calculation, including myself, Biggs was lying, because Lutfur Rahman's administration was a maladministration. It was wrong administration. It was a corrupt administration. It was dysfunctional, and it was dishonestly done, and it had nothing to do with meeting the needs of the Bangladeshis. What I have said on the facts and the evidence is, and remains and will remain forever, that Lutfur Rahman was abusing his position and focusing on getting votes for the next available poll or election. So that is where he was gearing his resources or his funding or allocation. And as I have said, and as the evidence says, he even granted any amount of money to people who did not even apply for grants. And he did that strictly, solely, absolutely on the basis that he thought that those persons he was funding would benefit him electorally and show their gratitude in mobilizing or casting their own votes or mobilizing other votes for him or his cabal of other 17 or 18 councillors. And the 17 or 18 councillors who remained outside of the action by the petitioners against Lutfur Rahman in the judgment as published by Richard Morey on the 23rd of April 2015 were only excused because of the stupidity of the applicants, the petitioners, because the petitioners did not think properly. And that is why, that is one of the mistakes and errors done by the petitioners who were overhyped to the skies. And I say that with evidence that the people who have been overhyped to the skies are the people who brought Lutfur Rahman down into our homeless as the elected mayor, who was later found to have used corrupt and illegal practices. These people were not interested in ending corruption or illegal practices. They were all over the place. So that is evident now. In the last 5 years, they have not done any activities or campaigns against the corruption that is the post of the executive elected mayor in Tower Hamlets. And they have not responded to any calls, many of the calls that I have made and our campaign has made to support the move to have the post scrapped. And they have not mobilized in any way that can be evident by reference to the published media of any description. The community is being therefore left in in an empty vacuum, and that vacuum must be filled by action. And I'm not seeing any action by those who claim to be active. So the people who are watching this, will be watching this, are being given the opportunity to engage with the Khoodeelaar campaign and support us in any lawful, legal, constitutional way in mobilizing the community and having the council turned into a democratic, accountable council and free from the encumbrance of the corrupt mayor post, elected mayor post. And this edition is ending at hours UK time, 21:37 hours GMT on Saturday, the 1st of August 2020. This is the second day of the Eid al-Adha, and this commentary has been a part of the contribution to the message of justice, fairness, and lack of selfishness and equality, and all the qualities that we advocate and we believe are in the message of the Eid. But the message is being lost by greed, selfishness, diversion, and ignorance most of the times, and we are asking the genuine believers in the community, in this faith, to respect the values that were actually given in the culture that created the Islamic faith. And the Islamic faith was inaugurated by the revelation and the command to the Prophet and to the followers, potential followers, that they should read in the name of God who created. Now, this is the message that is most in need today to be spread across humanity, regardless of whether the human being who is benefiting from this message is a Muslim or not. And until the next edition, we shall be ending this broadcast at this time, and with the legal disclaimer that this is a series of test transmissions, but the contents are not test, or the contents are not a drill. They are actually contents covered by international and UK authoring and writing and publishing rights. And we advocate that people who publish comments online or anywhere else have got the duty to concentrate on the evidence, the facts, instead of getting carried away by their petty spite and ignorance and diversion and deviation. So the message of this edition is the same as the messages have been in the previous editions, and the Muslims have no exemption from liability to be responsible neighbors to their neighbors. And this lack of exemption is the uniqueness of the message of Islam. And the cruelty to animals, cruelty to cats, and cruelty to other human beings must not be tolerated in the Muslim communities or in the behavior of Muslims. And the fact that the so-called leaders of the Muslim communities, the so-called ulama or the scholars, have failed to carry out the duty to protect other human beings from cruelty by those Muslims who are being in power at the time, in the place, in the context, as they have been failing abysmally to protect animals generally and to protect the cats. Abu Huraira, father of cats, was the name given by the Prophet to his companion who was always with cats. And so any genuine believer in Islam and who respects the traditions of the Prophet would never ignore cruelty being done to a cat, let alone violence being meted out to a cat of any age or anywhere in the world. And that duty is absolutely paramount in this time of pandemic and this time of desperate emergencies being caused by other human beings. And the Muslims have the duty to end the desperation by being kind and being kind every day, not just during the Eid festival, but throughout the year, throughout every day, every hour, every waking hour. So there is the end of this one.